G'day everyone, I'm the man called Kemosabe, the man with a plane from the land down under, and welcome to another series of Flash comic reviews. This one I'm dubbing The Woke Collective, a selection of comics that wear their politics on their sleeves. A common idea these days is that comics should be devoid of politics, which is narrow-minded and frankly impossible. It should be better phrased, don't tell people what to think. You can make a political comic, but when it's telling people what to think about an issue instead of presenting both ideas and letting people make up their own mind, you've strayed from entertainment and storytelling into propaganda and brainwashing. So that's my question for these books. Are they entertainment or are they propaganda? Our first review is a comic literally titled SJW by Sheldon Allen and Laura Val. When I first saw this book, this cover, I thought it was a gag. I contacted the creator to make sure this was for real. I tried to get him to agree to an interview about his book, but he didn't seem too interested. He wasn't rude, he just never seemed too keen on the idea of answering some questions about his motivations. Nonetheless, he sold me a copy of his book so I could review it, knowing full well our politics didn't align. And yet, reading the preview pages on the campaign page, I found a bunch of ideas I could agree with. I found at least as many that I disagreed with, but like Aubrey Citizens' Beef Brothers, I felt like there was some middle ground here, some shared ethos. How could I disagree with this? And how could I agree with this, when the term has been co-opted and run into the ground to the point where it means next to nothing, and is worn almost as a badge of honour by the right of centre? Despite first appearances, I'm not fully convinced this isn't satire. This isn't some kind of double blind that is pointing out the hypocrisy of the SJWs and the tactics they use. If it's not, it's a leftist Turner Diaries, a socialist's wet dream, visiting violence and retribution upon those they feel are responsible for the world's woes. Strangely, the people blamed in this comic are the very people so many of the left worship, the Jack Dorseys, the Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates and the Jeff Bezos. There's a massive cognitive dissonance in this comic if it's written by a legit card-carrying leftist. If so, it's a massive self-own, it's a guidebook for their hypocrisy. If it's written by a centrist or a right-leaning author, it's brilliant satire that works by showing how the left can't even keep its own story straight, how they can't even adhere to the lefty standards they demand everybody else live by. The book starts with a montage, Dark Knight Returns-esque, of newscasters reporting on the worldwide social media blackout that is inexplicably in effect. Even as an Australian, I recognise some of the newscasters. Rachel Maddow, Anderson Cooper, I think that's supposed to be Ben Shapiro, Don Lemon, Tucker Carlson, obviously, you can't cuck the tuck. I don't know the rest. Jeff Bezos flips out that his bottom line is being so severely hurt by this blackout. And then oddly Zuckerberg and other big names appear in his office, which is suddenly not his office. It's a shared psychic experience created by one of the SJWs so they can deliver their ultimatum to these powerful men who, essentially, run the online world. The SJWs threaten to completely dox these men, everything from bank accounts to their dick pics if they don't do what they say. And what they say is, get the Nazis off their platform. So you see the problem right away, the whole Nazi debate. The left wants to call everyone they don't agree with a Nazi. The right insists there is no such thing as Nazis anymore. Words are weapons, the most powerful weapons we have, and unfortunately, because of their stranglehold on educational institutions as well as big tech and mega corporation backing, the left has near complete control of modern language. This means they can change words to mean whatever they want, and we see it with the dilution of the impact and meaning of the word Nazi. The SJWs also want a ban on hate speech, much of which again comes down to semantics, because I'd agree with that, except what they call hate speech is not what I'd call hate speech. And to me a Nazi looks like this, to the SJWs, a Nazi looks like everyone who doesn't agree with them. Bezos and co wake from their dream, realising it wasn't a dream. Then we get this weird intermission. That first scene in the shared psychic experience took about a third of the book. It's most of what we saw on the crowdfunding page. There's a time jump illustrated by this neon pink page that tells us, in a hard-to-read, wannabe punk graffiti font, that the billionaires didn't acquiesce to the SJW's demands and lost billions and endured a massive doxing campaign. After which the social media barons did what the SJWs wanted, deplatforming anyone that disagrees with them. Tells you a lot about how they view facts and ideas. Anything different to what they think is wrong, even if it's correct. They are categorising information as acceptable versus unacceptable, harmful versus benign, as opposed to true versus false, inarguably the most important metric. After the SJWs get what they want, they then split up across the globe and each handle a different quote-unquote crisis, while discussing pop culture and the media. Is this scene a scathing look at the banality of post-Gen Y millennial Zoomer multitasking and pigeon-length goldfish attention spans? Or does the author think he's portraying his characters as cool, cutting-edge and modern by doing so? I'm left with so many unanswered questions. Every one of them comes across as cruel, callous, motivated by labels and disdain of their fellow man, so eager to judge, condemn and deride others for their choices and life situations. They claim to be against Nazis, but they are no better themselves, killing anyone who disagrees with them, mocking those that are different or don't walk in lockstep. These guys might be the hero of the books, but they're acting like villains. Add to that the next scene where Tech Bro is working to integrate his new technology into the prison systems, like an upgrade of Demolition Man. Criminals enter a kind of programmable stasis sleep, when minutes can seem like years and when any behaviour can be programmed into the subject's brain. Another slip of the mask gets Governor DeSantis in the stasis tube, getting his mind reprogrammed. Notice a pattern? These guys are genuinely terrifying in their supervillain-like scope. They want to erase free will, reprogramming criminals to think correctly. TechBro takes a couple of pages to answer the most common questions, but it's all spin. Ultimately, it boils down to forcing people to think the way you want, which might be the simplest, most universal trait of the SJW, both in the comic and in real life. They want you to think like them, and if you don't, you're less than human in their eyes. They'll call you a Nazi for now, but that's just a buzzword for what they really mean. Subhuman, inhuman, animal, unperson, of less worth. Elsewhere on the political spectrum, they might value truth, they value diversity of thought. They might not agree with what you say, but they'll fight to the death for your right to say it. It's an uneven playing field. One side of the political spectrum is playing by the rules, the other is playing to win at any cost. The final scene in the book has the tech giant elites gathering in robes, toasting to their winning move. They're voted to summon the champion to eradicate the SJWs. Bill Gates seems to be heading this gathering, until he's revealed to be white trash, who is also a shapeshifter. I don't think that was mentioned before. He gives the elite the same ultimatum: eliminate Nazis from all platforms. He tells them this is their last chance. He teleports away and the elite finish their toast. The SJW threat hasn't changed their course. They still intend to summon the champion, whatever that is. With this somewhat anticlimactic scene, the book ends. The more I think about this book, the less sure I am it's meant to be taken straight. In the middle it gets very preachy, well, preachier, and the topics tackled are spoken about so matter-of-factly I have no reason not to assume these are the beliefs of the author himself. The beliefs and ideas communicated are so extreme, so bizarre and downright evil that I struggle to believe anyone feels this way, but I do know these are the thoughts of some people because I've seen these ideas expressed by various people online. There is nothing in this book I haven't seen expressed before online, right down to the VR forced rehabilitation. This is an SJW's wet dream made manifest. The worst ideas, to them their best ideas, exercised on the page, creating a terrifying and foreboding future. If criminal is the metric used to forcibly rehabilitate, aka brainwash someone, how long until more minor infractions are deemed criminal enough for this to happen? How long until simply disagreeing with the mainstream narrative is enough to alter someone's brain against their will? The scariest thing, I think, is that you know there are people like this right now that think all of this is okay, that would be quite happy for these extremes to be made real. There are people who would be happy to see you or me dead or brainwashed because we don't believe what they believe. I'm not even talking about huge ideological leaps, just simple disagreement over what is too far and you get labelled a Nazi. When everyone's a Nazi, no one is. There are some who will shout, not a slippery slope, but everything I've seen to be called a slippery slope has invariably ended up at the bottom of the gorge in my lifetime. Like you might have heard online, 1984 wasn't meant to be an instruction guide, but the extreme left is using it so, and the SJWs of this book seem to be no exception. If Sheldon Allen is playing this straight, he shares some very dangerous, unconscionable and frankly evil ideas, and I'm glad he's only able to affect this make-believe world in any way. If he is creating this book as an indictment of the SJW extreme left mindset, it is a scathing and effective one indeed. If he's trying to play devil's advocate, I predict he will fail because as the far left moves further left, what is considered centrist is still far left. There is no middle ground anymore. There is no agree to disagree in a nation, and a world more ideologically divided than it's ever been since perhaps the last World War or maybe the Cold War. I'd respect an attempt to present ideas and let people decide for themselves. That's political comics done right, but I'm not convinced that's what this is. It's been said the best disinfectant for bad ideas is sunlight, is visibility. While I disagree with the ideas in this comic, I'd rather them be expressed, exposed to the light for all to see, rather than shut them down or label them as wrongthink. The ideas in SJW start uncomfortable conversations, but they are ones that should happen, that need to happen. If nothing else, this book will make you think. It'll make you wonder on where in the sand the line has to be drawn for you to cross it. As an evocative piece of media, it succeeds. As propaganda, the jury is still out. As an entertaining comic book, it falls short, but there is scope for the larger story to redeem this issue and create a complete narrative worth your time. Next up we have Frenemies, by Monty Nero and Yishan Lee. My wife loves the Miss Fisher Mysteries television show that aired on the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation down here, Natch. She's watched all 3 series several times and bought the movie on disc. Recently she picked up one of the books it was based on, hoping for a continuation of Miss Fisher's adventures, since the show had been ended a few years ago. Despite 4 attempts to read the book, my wife couldn't get past chapter 2. The way the book was written grated on her. It was flowery, it was overly verbose, it used far too many adjectives and adverbs, something I can attest to, having tried to slog through chapter 1 out of curiosity myself. These books are reasonably popular enough to be optioned by the ABC and to have an excellent show made from them, but the writing style of the book themselves, while loved by others, didn't work for my wife or for me. This is a similar phenomenon as what I experienced with Frenemies. From the first page I found it written in a twee, self-satisfied, self-aware style. I immediately disliked the tone, the cadence, the language used. For other people it might be, as the kids these days say, their jam, but I disliked it from the first panel. It was wannabe Terry Gilliam, wannabe Monty Python. Look at us, we're so self-aware. We're pointing fingers at our own tropes and flaws so that if you were to try and do so later, we can sidestep your criticisms. The story is a strange mishmash of genres. Nothing really lands quite right. It starts with news reports of 7 strange people with incredible power changing the face of the planet. We're immediately introduced to all 7 characters at once. A mistake if they don't look like the Avengers and have names that match their gimmicks. You can remember Ant-Man because he has an ant-shaped helmet, and Captain America because of the red, white and blue. Who's going to remember Carlton, Jamelia or Delphine? Rather than just being introduced organically, these characters are dumped in our laps and we're asked to accommodate them. I recommend in my writing advice videos that I create a brand their characters as soon as possible. Have them do something cool, something thematic and uniquely them as soon as possible so people will remember them. Think back to Black Widow's introduction in Avengers. You remember how she handled herself in that scene, and it set the tone for who her character was. Here we're given a random group shot and 7 names to remember. Names that are different enough to be difficult to remember, but similar enough to real life to forget. Even George Martin changed Edward to Eddard. Their names don't match their theme or appearance in any helpful way. The narration waxes lyrical about the high stakes and grand machinations that led to the events of the book, events we are as yet unaware of, but then it destroys all its seriousness with clumsy attempts at levity like this. Which of you meat wallets ate the last Tunnock's tea cake? Is this end of the universe Infinity War level stakes, or are these godlike beings really upset that the last cake was eaten? Pick a lane, you know. Then there's this page where everyone is screwing everyone else. We're 3 pages in and I already hate it. Also, I've never been a fan of the they have to stay together for some reason conceit. I've seen it work in Mark Englert's Capes Punching the Clock, which is excellent. You should totally go buy a copy. Get a copy of the Dynamo 5 trade paperback while you're at it. If Dynamo 5 was made today, it'd be optioned for a Netflix show so fast it'd make your head spin. There was another comic years ago, maybe as far back as the 90s, where a couple going through a divorce are empowered, but their powers only work when they're in close proximity to each other. Even when this conceit works, I'm not a fan of it. So between the flat minimal art with pastel colouring and the frankly insufferable characters, I found the rest of the book to be a real struggle to get through. The characters are universally unlikable, except maybe for the professor, whose research is his decades-long attempt to find his son, who mysteriously vanished one day as if he fell through the space between dimensions. If the idea was that we were supposed to watch the characters grow from blatant arseholes to universe-saving superhumans, it's probably a mistake to front-load the story with arsehole behaviour from the get-go. In the first issue, we're introduced to the 7 characters in more depth. While the professor's motivation to find his kid is pretty effective as a storytelling tool, anything like that is when you're a parent yourself, the rest of the characters are motivated purely by relationships, by their libido or social standing. It's like an episode of some sitcom show. I was going to say Friends, but Friends is pretty comfy. Is there a show where everyone's a terrible person motivated purely by getting laid and getting ahead at the expense of their peers? Seinfeld. This is cosplay Elvis Seinfeld without the likability, irony or reverence that made that show work. After we see the characters snipe and lie and screw and betray one another until the Professor's Stargate Hadron Collider portal machine malfunctions during the announcement of the winner of the cosplay contest being held at the university, sending the chosen 7 to another realm where they encounter the Professor's long-lost son who hasn't aged a day. Now the 8 individuals, all with complicated relationships to one another, are stranded in an alien dimension, still dressed in their cosplay outfits, and I guess they make their way home after being empowered somehow, which explains the start of this issue. I'm guessing they're going to do that kind of story where normal people get power and try to fix the world, and ultimately fail, as human nature is invariably fallible given a long enough time frame. I think just about every writer has one of these stories. I've got one of these stories, but I don't think it needs to be told anymore. It's all been done before. At the end of the issue is a letter from the author to the reader. He cites Indiana Jones as a major influence. He says he wants to see big galaxy-spanning high adventure. He wants to rip off, his words, a bunch of properties and ideas and mash them together to make the kind of story he wants to read. And I guess for better or worse, that's what he's done. If SJW was a necessary evil, a conversation that is better to be had even if it's uncomfortable, then Frenemies is a strange kind of proto-story, as in, who is this for and what purpose does it hold? What niche does this fill? Jack Reacher's popularity led to a whole genre of wandering tough guy stories. 50 Shades of Grey led to the explosion of the billionaire romance genre, and I don't even want to know what Chuck Tingle is responsible for. These genres might not be for you specifically, but they are for some people. I love Jack Reacher books. I buy the new one as soon as it hits the shelf and I'll have read it by the next day. They're all kind of the same, but that's what I like about them. I looked over my wife's shoulder as she was reading 50 Shades of Grey, and it was written in the first person present tense. After I finished vomiting and bleaching my eyes, I knew that the book was not for me. But it sold millions and led to a massive spike in cucumber sales, so it definitely was for someone. Who is Frenemies for then? I've read 2 issues of this comic and I'm still not sure. The catty characters and their frankly gross partner swapping and non-stop lusting for one another is a big turn-off. I want entertainment, not some low-key 70s R-rated not quite a porno. I'm I'm not a fan of humans cast far away into another realm, particularly a magical one, and even less so if everyone is trying to get into each other's pants rather than contend with what's at stake and solve problems. I can't say Frenemies is made for me, and I can't say that I'll return to Back Future issues. The final book being reviewed for the Woke Collective is Best Career by Commie Mark. Commie Mark, CG's favourite in real life communist, was recently called the Andy Kaufman of CG. I think that's wildly accurate and a hell of a compliment. This guy is a master showman, a master salesman, a very chill, very fun guy who is as much a businessman as he is a persona. Like he says, he's not a capitalist, but he lives in a capitalist country, so he's using our system against us. Mark's sense of humour is very dry, Sahara Desert dry, delivered in a pommy, mumble-rap fashion so monotone you're not sure if you're the butt of the joke or if you should just laugh along anyway. His first book, Best Career, is a droll, hilarious and ingenious reinterpretation of historical facts from the perspective of the glorious leader, our unreliable narrator. Best Career is a completely unique piece of media. Mark cleverly repurposes existing photos, propaganda diagrams, newspaper articles and other documents of the era to recreate the events that lead to the formation of North Korea. It's full of in-jokes, reoccurring jokes, tongue-in-cheek representations of world leaders and implicit swipes at communism itself. Sometimes there's no nice way to say this sort of thing. Sometimes there's no gentle way to get a point across. So I'll just say it. If someone didn't find Best Career to be funny, and yes, you could argue that humour is completely subjective and what I find funny you might not, and vice versa, but if someone didn't find it funny, I would suggest maybe it went over their head. Maybe the humour was too nuanced and they aren't capable of seeing how and why it was so funny. This is a complete performance piece, a completely conceptualised and executed piece of interactive media, from Mark's online persona to the book itself to his marketing to the campaign page, which itself was laden with droll just on the edge of too clever humour. Each perk and reward level is another joke that contributes to the whole performance. You get your value for money just from reading the campaign page, never mind the book that you receive. Some understanding of the events that led to the formation of North Korea, as well as some general 20th century world history knowledge, is necessary to really appreciate the layers of humour that Mark has woven into this book. As a glorious leader recounts his heroic deeds, enhanced to make him look better in every situation, the humour comes from his version of events narrated over actual historical occurrences. Some of my favourite parts include when the glorious leader redacts information mid-page and rewrites history to suit himself, the reoccurring joke of people questioning him getting sent to the gulag, and threats to send crops that don't grow to re-education centres. Some understandings of the failures and tenets of communism is helpful when reading this book. Like the classic "in Soviet Union TV watches you" jokes, these dunks on communism land better if you have a working knowledge of the ideology. Later in the comic, glorious leader arrives in Japan, emits several images and then shows Japan decimated. We notice the effects of the nuclear weapons used against the nation, but glorious leader takes credit for the devastation and says he won World War II single-handedly. The outrageous claims are funny, but even funnier when you hear some of the outlandish claims about the leaders of North Korea that their populace is expected to believe, and realise the comic book version of the glorious leader isn't that far from the truth as you'd first suspect. There are mock ads throughout, and redacted documentation that hint at the truth of North Korea's situation despite glorious leader's best intentions. It's amazing that because of his delusion and almost childlike desire to always be right, despite when he is clearly wrong, glorious leader comes off as rather sympathetic. It's a testament to the layers and details Mark has worked into this comic. It's a smart book for smart people and pushes the envelope on many fronts. What can be considered a comic? What can be done with a comic? How a creator can use resources and pre-existing media to create new works that they own and can subsequently profit from. Profiting from one's work isn't very communist, true, but Mark told me he's just redistributing the wealth. I can't argue with that. If he keeps making books like this and the upcoming Not Daredevil comic, where he rewrites dialogue from a public domain comic from the 30s to create a politically incorrect humour book, he'll continue to redistribute some of my wealth into his bank account. This brings us to the end of the Woke Collective, but have no fear, there will definitely be another edition. There are simply too many woke comics out there for me not to do another one of these. If you're an indie comic creator and you'd like a comic reviewed, hit me up on Twitter and we'll work something out. Thanks for watching, thanks for your time, and I hope to catch you on the next video. Take care of yourselves and be good to each other.